From KPRC Channel 2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Khambrel Marshall.
Good morning and welcome to this special edition of Houston Newsmakers. You might remember 3 weeks ago we had a segment on one of the Newsmakers programs that touched on immigration and the executive order signed by President Trump. It was clear then that we needed more time to have a coherent discussion about the immigration issues in Houston and the United States and the proposed solutions to solve them. This is that program. The challenge will be great because all of my guests this morning are attorneys, which means even with a full show, there likely won't be enough time to solve it, but we'll touch on as many issues as possible. Here this morning, Paul Simpson, chair of the Harris County Republican Party. Gordon Kwan is a former Houston council member and currently the principal of the Kwan Law Group, billed as your partner in immigration. Charles Foster of Foster Global Immigration Solutions, chairman of the Task Force on Immigration of the Greater Houston Partnership, past national president of Immigration Lawyers Association. And joining me later in this program will be Professor Jeffrey Hoffman, director of the Immigration Clinic at the University of Houston Law Center. Before we dig into the immigration issue, first to you, how is your grade card now for your Republican president? How's he doing?
I think it's been an exciting time for Republicans, Khambrel. When you get outside your media bubble and the rioters in the streets, Republicans are really happy about the performance of President Trump. A lot of changes come about very quickly. It looks as we're going to have the most conservative cabinet we've had certainly in our lifetimes. But I think it also bears out in the polling. A couple of things. The polling is showing more people agreeing that we're on the right track than have in, I think, a dozen years.
Which poll are you talking about?
Number of polls where
No, which poll?
I'm talking about the ones on the right track, like the Rasmussen polls, I think, and some others where they go and interview people about asking about, are we on the right track, wrong track? And in addition, look at the stock market. We just hit record highs. That says a lot, too, about people's confidence in our future.
So I could get into you with the polls all day long, but I don't want to start there. Because
I didn't talk about, right, but I'm talking about the right track, wrong track poll, which is the one that really matters. A lot of people feel a lot better about the future of the country.
Let's talk about immigration.
Okay.
The executive order that's now tied up in courts now, are we in the right direction there? Do you think that's in the right direction, or is there another direction that we need to take as far as?
I think it's absolutely in the right direction. President Trump was exercising power that Congress gave the president over 60 years ago, and the rollout was perhaps hasty and had some problems, but those kinks can be ironed out. I think the Ninth Circuit's ruling, as we sit here today, is keeping the stay in effect is wrong, but that's where it is.
What's wrong with it? Is it you guys are both immigration lawyers, and how do you look at that?
Well, certainly the president has the right to issue an executive order.
True.
No doubt about that. And he certainly has the authority to protect the country, but in a meaningful way where there's data to support what he's doing. There's no evidence that these countries have created terrorists who are a threat to our society. That was what was asked by the judges. Show us, what have they done? Do you have evidence? No, they don't.
Charles?
Yeah, of course, I agree with Gordon. I think it's, I do think the president has broad authority, and eventually the courts will give him that authority, particularly as with respect to the issuance of visas abroad, very broad authority. But I think it really was bad policy, trying to solve a problem in the wrong way. As Gordon said, they hit the wrong target. None of those individuals from none of those countries had ever been accused of a terrorist act. Furthermore, it really raises issues about the establishment clause of the First Amendment. Was it intended to be a broad ban against one religion?
Okay, so it's going to end up in the courts ultimately, but the president does have broad authority, does he not, to go ahead and put those limits and caps and so forth?
I think in the end there will be modify that executive order and it will be found to be enforceable. Whether it's good policy is a different question.
And that's something that...
Well, here's an important point. The courts don't be making, or shouldn't be making policy. The Ninth Circuit decided it would make policy. So what Charles just said was the court asked, how do you justify this ban? That's not the court's business under the statute. The court has no role making this policy. And all it was a 90-day temporary ban on 7 countries that the Obama administration had found were countries of concern. Right. So it did not apply to hundreds of millions of Muslims. It was not a Muslim ban. It made sense. It was consistent with what the actions the prior administration had taken. And it's no business of the courts to give First Amendment rights to people.
Let me stop you there for a second, because the prior administration didn't cut off everything. They lowered the ceiling. They cut back,
way back. But they identified there's 7 countries.
I get that, but there's a lot of times in the media there's like, well, because the Obama administration, they didn't cut off. They just cut cut back. And we've all said that the president has a right to do all of that. Let's talk about some of now we see this process going on where the deportations are taking place across. The deportations have been going on anyway. Under President Obama, there were a lot of deportations going on. There were more deportations under the President Obama than there were under the previous president. So is this just a continuation of that, or is it being done the way it should be done, Charles?
You're right. President Obama, if anything, never got on the right the full credit he deserved for having a very vigorous deportation policy. There is a difference. He did truly prioritize, and he went after people that had known associations with terrorists, with people convicted of serious crimes, child molesters, and that toward the end of the campaign is what President-elect Trump and President Trump promised. But in fact, his executive order has gone back to we can arrest and deport anybody. That is true if they're here illegally, but again, it's bad policy. We should have the limited resources focused on the removal of people that have been convicted of serious crimes.
Where's the line?
Well, the executive order he referred to had nothing to do with arresting and deporting. It was controlling visas of people from outside the country coming in. And the question is, we have an absolute right.
Executive order.
Okay, but we have an absolute right to keep folks from coming into the country that we deem not acceptable. And when you have the problem in those countries of basically dysfunctional governments, and we can't rely on those countries to identify folks who have problems.
Where's the line about when a person is sent back? What did they have to do? If they're in the country legally, where's the line determined about when they get sent back?
Well, I think the Senate Bill 4 in Texas gives you a good idea of what is a good approach, and that is when someone who's here illegally is detained for some offense, then they need to be, and they're subject to a detainer request by ICE, the federal immigration group, enforcement agency, then they need to be detained and referred back to the federal government.
Gordon, I saw an eye roll from you just a moment ago.
Well, I think Paul's looking at one executive order. There's another executive order that Charles is really referring to, which deals with how enforcement is to be done in the interior. And what Obama had done is looking at the limited resources the government has, how do you best appropriate those resources? So there was a listing of those people that had the most egregious crimes would be first on the list. And what we've seen under Trump right now is he's taken away authority from a lot of the local prosecutors as to try to work with the individuals on trying to work a system to let them stay or let them leave in an orderly manner.
Well, you bring up a good point, because among some of the early actions taken by President Trump is the call to punish those who support sanctuary cities. I think that's something we need to talk about. We're going to do that. What does that mean for Texas and Houston in general? We're going to talk about that. And how about Houston? Is Houston a sanctuary city? We'll talk about that right after this.